I've been the pastor of a small church for the last 7 years, and one of the things that I love about pastoring is having people in our home for meals. I love to cook, and there's something I find therapeutic about chopping vegetables and measuring out spices. And there is something about sharing food with friends that seems universally meaningful. But anyone who has prepared a large meal for friends or family knows that food is hard work. No great meal comes easily. That loaf of bread on your counter represents months spent growing, harvesting, and baking. We have the luxury of supermarkets and grocery delivery services and even food shows on TV. But in the ancient world, a decent meal was even harder to come by. Now imagine feeding a nation of people wandering through a dry, uncultivated wilderness. It didn't take long for the people of Israel to begin complaining about their food. Now, don't forget, these are the same Israelites who had seen God bring the mighty Pharaoh to his knees, the same God who had parted waters for their deliverance, the same God who had led them by smoke and fire and who had thundered on the mountain at Sinai. But as their bellies began to growl, everything God had done suddenly seemed small. That our stomachs can so deeply impact our perspective on life also seems universal. Exodus tells us that 1 month after leaving the land of Egypt, the whole community of Israel complained about Moses and Aaron. "If only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt," they moaned. "There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into this wilderness to starve us all to death." Their complaints would be absurd if we didn't catch ourselves so prone to the same complaints. Like theirs, our complaining has a tendency to distort our memory. The grass behind us is always greener, at least when what lies ahead looks barren. The Israelites had been slaves in Egypt. God had sent Moses to them because, as he told Moses, "I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering." That hardly sounds like the feast of meat and bread the Israelites now remembered. So what did God do? Did he rebuke them? Did he tell them to stop complaining? Did he call them ungrateful hypocrites? Exodus reads, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Look, I'm going to rain down food from heaven for you. Each day the people can go out and pick up as much food as they need for that day.'" We know it as the miracle of manna. God miraculously provided food each day for the grumbling Israelites. All they needed was to walk out from their tents and gather their day's meals from the ground. God was still providing, even for their empty bellies. There was nothing this God was not prepared to do for his people. So how did Israel respond to their wilderness buffet? Did they eat with joy? Did they thank God for his provisions? Did they repent of their complaining? Exodus tells us they first attempted to hoard the manna. God had promised food for each day, but many of the Israelites tried to hoard it away in jars and containers. They woke the next day to find their stockpiles filled with maggots and reeking. Second, and maybe worse, they began to complain again, this time that they had no meat. It's easy to shake your head in frustration and disbelief at these ungrateful Israelites. I mean, how, after receiving so many miracles, can they complain and still distrust God? But then an uncomfortable question sinks in. Might we be like them? Might God be providing for us, and in our desperation, we hoard it away without a moment's gratitude? Might our continual complaining be robbing us of the joys of recognizing and receiving the provisions he is providing right before us, laid out across this wilderness ground? Tonight, my family will probably sit down at our table as we usually do. We will give thanks for our meal before we eat it. I want to mean it, not just as a formality or some lesson for my kids, but in my own heart. Ours is a God who provides, from our tables to our deepest challenges in life. and how prone we are to missing all the ways he is pouring out his grace and mercy and fullness to us. In the wilderness littered with manna, or around our own table spread with weekend meals, all that we have is a gift from him. Our God provides. Listen.